me throw it up on the screen here for you. You guys can see this here. Sorry, I'm a little bit out of practice. I'm not going at my normal pace. Okay, so yesterday was day 10, our catch-up day. Today we're starting, oh, I gotta refresh this. What's happening? Here we go, yeah. So today we're starting day 11. So this new unit, we've just finished genetics and talking about sort of the molecular machinery inside of you, how things go from just your DNA code into a physical structure. That was DNA transcription that we talked about. And then we talked a little bit about how to actually pass on those traits to your children. You have 2 copies of every allele, every gene, and then you get to give one of those to your children, and you are a combination of one from your mom and one from your dad. And we talked a little bit about the statistics of that and how to do a little bit of simple problem solving with genetics. In this unit, we're going to be looking at basically body systems, your systems. How do you function? It's specific to mammals. So this is technically this unit is called the anatomy of mammals. You're a mammal. This morning you were talking about milk glands, Katab, and like that's something specific to mammals. Only mammals have that. So, and we're going to be talking about some key mammalian systems, specifically the digestive system, the respiratory system, and the circulatory system. So today is all about digestion. In the first part, and some of this might be a little bit of review from grade 10. I don't know what people covered with digestion in grade 10, maybe nothing. So if you covered nothing in grade 10 in terms of the digestive system, that's fine. I'm going to review everything anyway. But there is a video here that, and the notes right above it, where it says note package. And this is going to go through the structures of the digestive system and what it does. Okay? So it goes step by step, starts at the mouth, and then basically follows food as it goes all the way down through the digestive system. It's going to make this lesson makes a lot of reference to that macronutrients note that we did way back in the first unit. I don't know if you guys remember that, where we talked about protein, carbohydrates, and fats. Those are like the 3 primary nutrients, okay? When we're talking about the digestive system, what we're talking about basically is taking those 3 things, protein, carbohydrates, and fat, breaking them down into their most elementary particle, the smallest pieces of them, and then absorbing them into your blood so that you can use them, okay? So there's really 3 separate systems at work here in digestion, 1 to break down fats, 1 to break down proteins, and 1 to break down carbohydrates or sugars, okay? So as you're going through, you can kind of separate it out like that, but at each location, I'm talking about what happens to those 3. So like things enter the stomach, what happens to fat? Nothing. What happens to sugar? Nothing. And then what happens to protein in the stomach? In the stomach, protein gets broken down by an enzyme called pepsin. I'm not going to go through all this stuff again, but where it takes a very long chain of amino acids. You guys remember from protein synthesis, those are the little pieces of proteins that get built up. So it takes a long chain of those and it chops it into smaller chains. That's what that enzyme does. And there's also stomach acid that unfolds the proteins in your stomach. So that's the main thing that's happening in your stomach. It's mostly protein digestion. Anyway, so I go through that whole process. At the end of this, what you should be able to do is you should be able to label a diagram of the digestive system. So you should know what your parts are, okay? This is kind of just like basic life knowledge. You know, if you go to the doctor and your doctor says, oh, you have a problem with your small intestine, it would be probably good if you didn't say, I don't know what that is, you know, or I don't know where that's located or what the purpose of it is. These are like general things that are good to know about your body, okay? So you should know the general anatomy of your digestive system. There's a diagram as part of the note, and yeah, you should be able to label that. You should be able to know the basic function of each of these locations, okay? So what is happening in the stomach? What does it do? What is happening in the small intestine? What does it do? What does the pancreas do? What does the liver do? Okay, so all of these things like have a function in terms of digestion. What do they do? So you should have a basic idea of what each of those things do. In terms of the enzymes, I talk a lot about the different enzymes of digestion here. And I also say that we're going to follow up on that in this lesson and talk about them later, but I actually cut that part because there are so many digestive enzymes and it's quite a complicated process. So really, I just want you to know the basics in terms of enzymes. In other words, where are enzymes operating? Okay, and in general, what are they doing? So for example, like there's an enzyme in the stomach that breaks down, like I said, long chains of protein into shorter chains. It's called pepsin. You don't really need to know that it's called pepsin, okay? But you should know that there is an enzyme that is a protein that is cutting up big pieces of protein in your stomach, all right? That's the part I need you to know. Like there's an enzyme that does something in there for protein. You don't need to necessarily know what it's called, all right? So that knowledge is sort of extra that I'm adding in there, the names of all these things, but don't get too bogged down in this enzyme is called this enzyme is called this enzyme's made here and works here. You don't really need to know the super detail of that. Just in general, where are these things being broken down and where are enzymes helping to break it down? Okay, so in general, as you're going through here, keep that in mind so that you don't get too overwhelmed with the actual amount of content and names of things. The enzyme names are not super, super important. Now that being said, for example, you did a project on galactosemia, right?
Yeah.
So there's one aspect of the digestive system that's especially important for your project, which is lactase. What does lactase do, and where is it located in the digestive system? Like it's specifically in here. I'm going to talk about that. You need to know that for your presentation. So it might be useful. There are definitely useful parts in here, specifics, but like in general, you don't need to know that. So once you're done watching the lesson video, I think it's about half hour long. There's a pretty cool video here that follows food through an actual person's digestive system. It's a video, so they've taken a camera and put it in, okay, which is really weird. But I'm assuming up the nose. So they've gone up somebody's nose and down through their esophagus, and they're following food going through a human digestive system. It keeps showing a baby in this picture, but the inside of this person is not a baby. This is an adult's digestive system that you're looking at, just so you know. So I'm 100% certain that they did not force a camera down a baby in order to take this video. This is definitely from an adult who was consenting at the time, I'm assuming. So I put a little warning on here. Yes, there's some graphic digestion images here. It's kind of gross. It's squirty and wet and things like that. It's following through your digestion, but it is cool though, and you actually get to see the structures that are talked about in the lesson. I talk about how there's like folds on the inside of the stomach. You can see the folds, like you can actually see the inside of a human stomach. Your stomach looks like that.
Are you watching the chart?
We're not going to watch it right now. You're going to watch it after the lesson. Okay, so this is up on there. Once you're done that, there are 4 analysis questions that you're going to complete, okay? This is stuff directly from the content that was in the note, and you should create a new Google Doc for your analysis questions for this unit, okay? Because we're going to do 3 days of this unit before we break again. And then lastly, I have a little extra quiz here. Again, this is not for marks. This is just to test your own knowledge. Do you remember stuff from the lecture, or do you need to go back and have a quick look over it? Yes?
I remember we had 3 quizzes. There was one that you assigned that was like pretty small. It was like a Google form.
Yeah, this is a Google form one.
Yeah, then there was another one that was on here.
That's a summative quiz.
Okay.
Yeah. So all the summative quizzes are through Brightspace. There's no time limit, and they're open book.
Oh.
So you can take as long as you want. You can have your notes out. You can Google things while you're doing the quiz.
You can Google them?
Absolutely. You can do whatever you need to while you're working on it. The idea here is not to test it's not really a memory test. It's do you get the concepts? And if you're not sure about a word, look it up. Okay, you have the ability to look stuff up. So I think maybe people weren't writing it like that, although it does say that in the instructions, but definitely take as much time as you need, okay? Like some people took 4 hours to write it because they just had it on in the background or whatever, like that's fine. Okay, think of it as an assignment where you're answering questions. That's really what it is. Did you have a question, Katab?
No, that was a really long stretch.
Oh, okay. If you haven't written the quiz yet, please do that, by the way. About half the class hasn't written it yet. So it was meant to be done that same day, but if you haven't gotten to it, please write it because I need that stuff for your mark. Okay, learning block 2. This I am going to do together with you. So in learning block 2, I'm going to go through and do a note with you where we're going to talk about some disorders of the digestive system. Where can things in the digestive system go wrong? What happens if it operates too fast? What happens if it operates too slow? What happens if you get inflammation in your bowel? What is heartburn? Things like that, okay? So these are disorders of the digestive system. We're going to do that note together. It is included in that note package that you do for the first part. Okay, it's just the second part of it, but we're gonna, like I said, we'll do it together. And I did post my Google Slides presentation that I'm going to go through. It's posted there in case you missed something or whatever and want to go back. Finally, when we're totally done at the end, I have another chubby emu video here. I love these. I don't know. I personally think these are super cool. They're medical case studies, like the first one that you watched. Hopefully you watched the first one as well from a couple weeks ago. And this one is about, oh. No, that's not right. I posted the wrong one in there. Mom drank 3 gallons of water. That's not the right one. Anyway, I gotta switch that up. So you'll probably need to refresh this towards the end. What one did I put in there? I'm trying to remember. It was about somebody who was like severely constipated. Oh, because they took Gravol. That's what it is. So I gotta switch up that video. It's not supposed to be this one. But anyway, it's a medical case study about somebody who took too much Gravol and essentially stopped their digestive system from functioning. It turns your digestive system off if you take too much of it. And then it's all about like what happens. What happens when you turn it off over the long term? Hint, hint, it's nothing good. It's bad if you do that. So anyway, I left that at the end there. It talks about a lot of the stuff from the lesson and then applies it to a real world situation. A really interesting, fascinating one. So, okay, I'm gonna let you guys get to work. You're gonna watch, like I said, you're gonna watch this lesson video. And then there's the note that goes along with it. For you at home, I am gonna leave the chat on all day. I actually am available now because I'm at school. So please feel free to type into the chat if you have any questions. You wanna follow up with me. And email me. I'll be on my email and we can chat. Okay, guys, I think Katab suggested that we do 2 laps today. I have no problem with that. So we might be back a little bit later from our lunchtime, which would be, what do we normally get back? 11:15 or something? So it might be like 11:17 or something we'll come back. Okay, anyway, let me know if you need anything. Hey guys. If you're at home and you're here, if you could let me know that you're here for the second half of the day, just with a here or present.
Are you supposed to do that?
Take attendance twice a day. Yep.
I've never said here second time.
So I'm marking you absent if you're not here at the second time.
I've always been there though.
Well, I'm asking you to do it every time.
Okay,
Okay, sorry, Katab. I have no way of knowing who's on the live feed unless people tell me. So.
I didn't know. I think I might have just like skipped it because what's it called? Like, I've always been there. Because here there's sometimes I miss the beginning of them.
Sometimes I'll check in the in Brightspace to see if you've logged in during that time, and then I'll use that instead. But I don't always have a chance to do that. What's up?
Mine doesn't actually tell you if it's logged in.
Why not?
Because you told me. Remember when you said?
It says that you haven't accessed course content, but the logins it does count.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, it does count logins. Yeah. So what I said to you was it's showing that you haven't actually accessed any of the course content tabs.
I did that too. One time I did
Right.
it with you.
So I think that is a mistake. So it doesn't actually track that accurately. So I've stopped using that as a metric. Anyway, people at home, thank you. Let me just quickly mark all this off. Marker. Nadia. Hannah. Brody. Cool. Yeah, and if you come in late, just chime in with a here and let me know. Okay, so this morning, you guys had an opportunity to like go on a tour of the digestive system from mouth to anus. You went through the whole system. We talked about what happens in the mouth, what the esophagus does, what happens in the stomach, what happens in the small intestine, what happens in the large intestine, and then finally the expulsion of the waste material, whatever's left over at the end. What we're going to do in the second half here is we're going to talk about what happens when things in the system go wrong. So this is part of the same note, by the way. So if you have that note, or you should have that note, it is, question? Yeah, for sure. Page 11. Yeah, the note is up at the top. So this is the same notes package, but just at the bottom of the notes package. What we're gonna do is go through a whole bunch of different illnesses of the digestive system. So I've got a list here: choking, GERD, ulcers, gallstones, diarrhea, constipation, hemorrhoids, IBD, polyps, appendicitis, and C. difficile. And for each one, what I'd like you to pick out as I'm talking about each of these is the cause. So why do you get this? The symptoms, in other words, what happens to you when you get it? And the treatment, what can we do for you if you do get it? Okay? You can totally summarize here. So like this isn't written down necessarily word for word in the presentation. So you're just summarizing. What's the cause of choking? Food particles blocking your trachea, okay, or blocking your air pipe. Like just summarize, like point form, okay? So you don't need to write big long sentence answers for these. Simple summaries are fine. For treatment, just try and be as accurate as possible. You know, whatever we talk about in the presentation, just approximate it as close as you can. But again, point form is totally fine. So for example, if it's like a drug treatment plan or something like that, you can just say that, drugs. Okay, it's like you don't need to have a big long sentence answer for these. Okay, so let's get started here. I gotta pull my presentation. I think it's probably better if I do this on my iPad. It'll be easier to see. Digestive system disorders. This presentation is posted, by the way, so if later on you want to go back or take a look at it, you missed something on a slide, it's posted. You guys see this? Yeah.
Wait, would this be the, I don't know if you can see it, but would this be the large intestine? Would I mark it as that right here or no? That little point, bring it closer to the sentence.
The little point right there is the appendix.
No, that's the appendix, this one.
So that's the first part of the large intestine right there. Yeah.
So I could call it large intestine.
That's what it is, yeah. It's the ileocecum. It's the first part of the.
Should I say ileocecum or?
What do I have written on the note? I can't remember.
It doesn't say it. You have some blank.
I'll just leave it then. I would leave it. The parts of the large intestine you need to label, you've already labeled. The parts of the large intestine that you need to label, you've already labeled. So I would.
So I don't need to label these.
I wouldn't worry about it. It's just part of the large, another part. But if you have ascending transverse and descending colon, you're good. Those are the parts I want you to know.
Descending colon.
Yeah. Those are the parts I want you to know. So.
Oh, okay. So you don't. Okay. We could know it, but you don't want it.
That's right. That's right.
Sorry, my bad.
Oh, no worries. Okay. So I do mention a few times in this presentation that there is some gross imagery. So I'll try and throw up a little warning here. I think I have these throughout the presentation to let you know when you're about to see something super gross. If you don't want to look directly at them, that's totally up to you. But just be advised, I'm going to show you pictures of things that are going to be uncomfortable to look at. For example, people's ulcers or whatever, or inflamed colon or whatever. Okay, so if that's going to be problematic for you, I'm just giving you a heads up. Okay, so before we start about talking about choking, which is the first illness that's on there, I want to quickly mention, what does normal swallowing look like? Okay, just so we have a reference point here, because choking is the opposite of this. It's not this. So when you swallow something, is there a way for me to point at this on here? Can I? Oh yeah, I can. Cool. How do I do that? Okay, so first of all, you're going to chew. Okay, that's masticate. Chew it up. I mentioned previously in the other note that that's a form of mechanical digestion. You're physically breaking up the particles. You add a little bit of saliva to it, which lubricates stuff. It also breaks down sugars. That's the salivary amylase. It's an enzyme. And then your tongue is going to push this stuff to the back of the mouth. Once things hit the back of the mouth, they activate what's called the swallowing reflex. So this is actually at the spinal cord level, this reflex. You don't really have control over it. So when your tongue touches the back of your throat, it initiates the beginning of a wave of contraction that goes down your esophagus. And if you swallow right now, you can actually feel a little bit of it. It's like it's like a push down that happens right here. So that wave, that peristaltic wave right here that travels down the esophagus and pushes your food down, ideally, it grabs that bolus of food that you've just swallowed into your oropharynx, the back of your throat. Okay? So that's ideally what happens. Also, is there a way for me to zoom in on stuff? No, I can't zoom in. Hopefully I can point to it here. Your epiglottis, which is this little flap right here, as part of that reflex, automatically flips down and covers up your trachea. So it covers up your breathing tube so that you don't swallow the food into your windpipe, okay, into your trachea. That's obviously essential. Yes?
Is that why so this I've tried this before, when you drink water and try and breathe at the same time, you can't, or you're doing something like that. Yeah, I don't know what I've tried it, but like.
Don't try that.
No,
You can circumvent that reflex. So the easiest way to circumvent the reflex is to laugh. Laughing actually, by expelling the air when you're laughing, it actually pushes the flap open while you're swallowing, which is why when people are laughing when they're eating, that's when you're the most prone to choking. Yeah. So anyway, you can circumvent the reflex, but it's generally not a good idea, obviously. So this is when everything goes right. You have that bolus of food pushing against the back of your throat. You activate the reflex. The epiglottis swings down and covers your trachea, and then the food gets pushed down by that peristaltic wave. So choking is when that doesn't happen for whatever reason. You've laughed. You've deactivated the mechanism that causes your epiglottis to flip over and cover your trachea. Or some people just have a weak musculature, and so they're more prone to choking due to whatever. There's a lot of illnesses that can potentially cause that. So bottom line here is a food bolus, pieces of food have been swallowed into your trachea, into your windpipe. Now, ideally, that is going to be just at the very top of your windpipe, right around the larynx area, and you cough that up. So that's what normally happens when something goes down the wrong pipe, is that you just cough it back up. Did you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering if it goes into your lungs. But yeah.
So it can become very problematic. So if it goes all the way into your lungs, you aspire it all the way in, which is physically possible to do. If it's a really big chunk of food, then that could potentially cause a serious choking problem. If it's a tiny little chunk of food, or we're talking about like small particles of food, you have little hairs, you'll cough, and you also have little hairs on the inside of the lining of your trachea that will slowly move tiny particles back up again.
Oh, and that's how it you cough it back.
That's right, up until you can cough it back up again near the top. So that's how it's just a self-cleaning mechanism. It will clean on the inside. Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Wait, so what do you mean by small particles? Like how small is it?
Like food particles that are like the size of like a crumb, exactly, like a crumb size.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if it's any bigger than a crumb size, you're gonna have to aspirate it, like you're gonna have to cough it out. Anyway, if it's a large piece of food and it's enough to actually physically block your trachea, that's when you're really gonna get into trouble. So then you've essentially completely blocked off your ability to breathe. And that's called asphyxia. So asphyxia is when you cannot bring any new oxygen into your body due to a blockage in your airway. You have a little bit of oxygen in your lungs, so depending on the person, you can usually be conscious for a few minutes, 2-ish minutes. And after about 2-ish minutes, there's so little oxygen in your lungs that you stop adding more oxygen to your blood, and then there isn't enough oxygen in your blood for your brain to function any longer, and then you become unconscious. So you do usually have about 2 minutes, and that's what we're talking about when we're talking about choking. Treatments for choking, do you guys know what it is? What is it? It's the Heimlich maneuver, okay? So the Heimlich maneuver is reserved for non-productive choking. Non-productive choking is not when people are coughing and trying to get something up. It's when people have no respiration. They can't pull any air in. Once you're at that point and you can't physically cough it up anymore, that's when the Heimlich becomes like useful as a tool to potentially dislodge something in the airway.
So when you do the Heimlich maneuver, does it push onto your lungs and then your tracheus, or like the little flap thing, it opens up and then it pushes the air out and then that's how it comes out?
Basically. What it is like, imagine that you like stuffed a marble into the top of a balloon.
Okay.
It's squeezing the balloon until the marble pops back out.
Okay.
That's what you're doing. So ideally, you're pushing. It's like a scooping motion that this is, by the way, not medical information. I'm not training anybody to do the Heimlich here, but you're like doing a scooping motion on the diaphragm. Oh yeah, sure, I can absolutely do that. Oh boy, now I forgot what the questions were that were asked. What did you just ask? Oh yeah, what's the purpose of the Heimlich? So the idea here is that you are putting pressure on the lungs, kind of like a balloon, in order to push the object that's trapped in the neck of the balloon out of the balloon. So that would be the treatment for non-productive asphyxia when you're choking. If you're at the hospital and you have an upper airway blockage that's very severe, and this can happen for various reasons, and it can't be removed easily, you can also perforate, and I don't recommend any of you guys do this, but you can perforate the trachea a little bit lower in order to essentially open up an extra airway into the trachea, which is in the front, tracheotomy. So that's also an emergency procedure. They can do that in an ambulance if they're not able to remove, as long as it's in the upper airway. Obviously, if it's lower down in your airway towards your bronchus, which is right about your armpit level, then they can't do that anymore because the hole would be above the blockage, so it wouldn't do anything. But anyway.
They cut a hole in?
They cut a hole in. Yeah, right in your trachea, right here. There's not much blood supply here, and there are no large blood vessels right in the middle.
Skin, right?
It's a little bit of fascia and skin, and then you can actually feel the bumps from your trachea right underneath it. So that's your trachea right underneath. So you can kind of poke a hole in the side. Again, I'm not recommending that anybody does this on their own, but again, they could do that in an ambulance potentially to create another opportunity for people to breathe if the airway is blocked. So that's choking. And I consider this an issue of the digestive system because this is really a malfunction of the digestive system. You have not swallowed food down the correct way. All right, let's move on. GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease. So if you'll remember from the presentation, you have a sphincter at the top. Oh, I'm pointing to totally the wrong place here. A sphincter at the top of your stomach. You can't see this on video here. It's about somewhere at this level on you right here. And that sphincter is at the bottom of your esophagus. So you can see the esophagus right here going down to the top of the stomach. And it's basically a backflow valve to prevent food from going back up your esophagus again. In other words, like if you were eating standing on your head, if this was like totally gravity-fed system, when you swallowed something, it would just leak back up to your head again. But it doesn't. You have a valve right there. So that valve is your lower esophageal sphincter. And if you have good lower esophageal sphincter tone, that's a fairly strong muscle, in general, it works pretty well. So it prevents food from going back up into your esophagus. However, lots of people have very bad tone of their low esophageal sphincter, or there are other complicating factors that increase the pressure on their abdomen. For example, obesity increases the pressure on your abdomen. Pregnancy increases the pressure on your abdomen. And so if you're in that boat where you have additional pressure placed on your abdomen, it could potentially force stuff back up past your LES, your lower esophageal sphincter. So that's the cause of GERD. I'll give you a little trigger warning here. I'm about to show you what it looks like when you have severe GERD for a prolonged period of time. Okay, it doesn't look very nice. So because again, as mentioned in the presentation, your stomach is full of stomach acid, right?
Yeah.
And pepsin, which is a enzyme that is designed to break down proteins. And yes, it breaks down your own cells' proteins if you get it on your own cells. So this is the inside of somebody's esophagus after they've had prolonged exposure to stomach acid is really what it is. Okay, so this is GERD. Sometimes it's also called acid reflux disease or gastric reflux. And the symptom that you get from this is heartburn. You may have had heartburn before. Maybe at your age you've never had heartburn. You probably will at some point in your life. But heartburn doesn't necessarily have to be this. This is bad. So this is somebody who's had prolonged GERD for like a week or something like that.
That's like acid reflexes, right? So that would be like, so let's say if you're choking on your stomach acid, you'd be like, and that would be the acid going back up your.
If you're choking on your stomach acid?
Yeah, you could like, if not choking on the stomach acid, but you feel like, so if it comes back up and you start choking because it's something's happening. Okay, so this basically happens to my dad. He has like something with his his stomach or something that he sometimes when I don't know the English term for it, but I know the Serbian term. He says muchiga kiselina, and that's like, I don't know what kiselina means in English, but it's like when he chokes on, he starts to feel something weird after he eats like some certain food, and then he starts to like, if something blocks his airway, and I think it's the acid or something, and he starts like choking, and he needs like air.
So I know exactly what this is.
Oh, okay, you know.
Yeah, so what that is this. It's
Yeah.
GERD.
Yeah.
Plus, you can have this inflammation go all the way up
Yeah.
inside of your esophagus, and if it goes up really high, you get a spasm in your esophagus, which actually makes it hard to breathe. It swells up and blocks your trachea.
Okay, yeah, probably that's what it is.
So that's just having a very severe GERD. So some people do have it very bad, and then that's one of the symptoms that they get from it. Yeah, it's pretty bad. So obviously, well, you guys have heard of like heartburn treatments before, right? You have like Pepsid AC or whatever. You can like take drugs potentially to reduce the stomach acid. So that's one route. So you can just reduce the stomach acid so when it splashes back up, it doesn't cause so much damage. But over a long period of time, obviously that's not good for your digestion. It inhibits your proper digestion. And it weakens your immune system because your stomach acid actually kills a lot of the stray bacteria and stuff in the food that you eat. So it does make you more prone to getting sick if you take it for long term. Yes?
When you vomit, is that like the heartburn feeling?
Yeah. Except you're getting it all the way up your esophagus, and so it burns everywhere, all the way up.
You know, I've only had it when like, you know, you have to throw up or whatever.
Fair enough. Some people get this all the time. Like some people get it after every meal. So
Like the weird like
that burning sensation.
Burning.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
So that's one way to treat it. You could potentially reduce the amount of stomach acid. You could take something to neutralize the stomach acid. So a lot of stuff neutralize stomach acid. There are some more modern treatments where they attempt to repair the sphincter at the top of the stomach surgically. So you can have that done. That's a pretty complex surgery, but it is possible to do that, and it doesn't always have a good. It doesn't always work terribly well, but that is also a possibility. I think I have some of these on the next page here. The main treatment for GERD, though, is just to try and prevent the stomach acid from refluxing. So a good way to do that, and unfortunately I have this in my family as well, is you have to eat smaller meals. Put less stuff in your stomach. So if you put less in, you're less likely to get reflux. You're not supposed to eat late because you don't want to have a lot of stuff in your stomach when you lie down to go to bed. So if you lie down to go to bed, obviously your stomach is going to be on its side and things will just leak out into your esophagus if you're sleeping. So you don't want to eat near bedtime, late in the evening. There are other things that make GERD really bad. They weaken how tightly the sphincter closes at the top of your stomach. Things like caffeine, chocolate, smoking is really bad for GERD. It really weakens the sphincter at the top of your stomach. Spicy foods make the acid worse. Fatty foods can make the acid worse. Peppermint is a trigger for a lot of people. Alcohol can be really bad for people. So a lot of people in my family can't drink any alcohol because it just causes really bad heartburn. So anyway, all of those things can potentially cause pretty bad GERD. I think we talked a little bit about some of these other solutions too. Oh yeah, then the last part on here is the surgery. So the endoscopic treatment to potentially tighten that sphincter up. It doesn't work great. You also don't want to make it too tight because otherwise when you swallow food, it gets stuck. It can't actually make it into your stomach. So you do have to be careful. You can't make it too tight of a seal or stuff can't go down anymore. Anyway, so that's the symptom of this is heartburn, a burning sensation that you like feel in your chest, which is quite uncomfortable. There's also the problem if you have long-term GERD and you don't treat it properly, is that repeatedly damaging the tissue above your esophagus can cause what's called Barrett's esophagus. And Barrett's esophagus is a precursor to cancer, to esophageal cancer. So eventually, if you keep doing it, damaging it over and over and over again, it can cause esophageal cancer eventually. So it's a good idea to treat GERD. You can't just like let it go. All right, so that's GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease. Ulcers. An ulcer is basically a hole. You've probably had these in your mouth before. You've had like a canker sore or something like that, where you just get like a little sore in your mouth. It's basically a hole in the lining of your mouth, and usually it's associated with a bacterial infection in your mouth, but not always. Sometimes you like bite your lip or something, or you bite your cheek and you get a little canker. So that's an ulcer. These ulcers, though, are the ones that occur in the stomach or in the small intestine. You're getting a hole in it, basically. They call it an erosion on here, but that's just a hole. And the most common are to get them in the bottom of your stomach or the first 12 inches of your small intestine. That's the most common place to get an ulcer. Okay, I'm going to show you some pictures. So warning, this is what a stomach ulcer looks like. It's not pretty. Okay, there they are. So both of these are ulcers. These are both stomach ulcers. Actually, no, that first one there is small intestine. The second one is stomach. But anyway, they're holes. So when these are fairly minor holes, they're not super dangerous. They're painful. This hurts, by the way, if you get one of these. But if you treat them, in general, they're not super dangerous as long as the holes are relatively small. If they're very big and they actually perforate right through the stomach into your abdomen, or they perforate through your small intestine into your abdomen, they can potentially be fatal because you could have just food leaking into your abdomen. It causes sepsis. So it's a bacterial infection in your blood. So these can potentially be extremely dangerous if they're not treated properly. The weird thing about ulcers is that they're almost entirely caused by bacterial infections. So we used to think that ulcers were caused by mostly stress or you name it. There's like a million things that people thought caused ulcers. Spicy food, people thought all kinds of things. But more recently, we figured out that almost every ulcer is caused by a bacteria called Helicobacter pylori. So when you get an infection of that bacteria, it prevents your stomach or small intestine from producing mucus, which is that coating on the inside that protects it from stomach acid. And once those cells are gone and don't produce the mucus anymore, your stomach acid starts to eat a hole in the side of your stomach, and that's where you're going to get your ulcer from. So you can do some dietary modifications and stuff to help treat this. But realistically, though, the best treatment is to get antibiotics. So there are antibiotics that you take to kill Helicobacter pylori, and once you've removed the bacterial infection, this usually heals up pretty good. It doesn't require surgery unless it's very, very severe. I should also mention that there are some drugs that can cause potentially gastric ulcers. Ibuprofen is a really big one. A lot of older people take ibuprofen for like pain management and stuff like that. But it does cause thinning of the lining of your stomach and potentially can cause ulcers. My grandfather got an ulcer from taking ibuprofen. So you definitely can get them, but it's just not as common as getting them from Helicobacter pylori. So how do you know you have one? It hurts. You have a pain in your stomach all the time. In general, the pain is worse when your stomach is empty, which is a little bit unusual. A lot of stomach pain issues are usually worse when the stomach is full, and so that's one of like the differentials that they use to try and figure out if something is an ulcer. If you have if your stool is black, if your poop is black, that's an indication that you have black. It means that you probably have blood in your stool, but it's from the upper part of your digestive system. So black blood in your stool means that you're bleeding in the upper part of your digestive system, small intestine or above. If you have red in your stool, red blood, that usually means that the bleeding is occurring in your large intestine, the last part of your intestine. So you can kind of, but based on the color, you can figure out where you're bleeding inside if you have internal bleeding. And you can diagnose it by X-ray. They do a procedure where you drink it's like a mildly radioactive dye, and then they just image your chest while you drink it, and then it's really interesting. I've had this done. So you can you can like see on a little screen it coat the inside of your stomach, and then they just check like, does it go out of your stomach? So if they see it like going into a hole in your stomach, then they'll just be like, oh, this person has a hole in there. That's how they figure it out.
That's
They can
cool.
follow it down. Yeah, so it is pretty cool. Yeah. And then, like I said, it's mostly treated through antibiotics. But if it's not caused by, and by the way, you can figure out if you have H. pylori, Helicobacter pylori, with like a simple test. They can just do a swab and like check to see if you have Helicobacter pylori. If you don't have it and you have an ulcer anyway, then they're going to try and treat it through some other means. Maybe have you stop smoking, stop using NSAIDs like ibuprofen or whatever. Okay. What's the next thing I'm talking about here? Ooh, gallstones. So, from the video lesson, do you guys remember what the gallbladder does? Fair enough. So the gallbladder is attached to the liver, and it holds bile. That's its purpose. It's like a little storage area for bile, and bile is used to help break down fats. Did you guys watch the video of the digestive system where like the food going through, like the gross video? Did anyone actually watch that? Okay, if you do watch that video, that like brown goo that you can see like shooting into the small intestine, that's bile. If you've ever thrown up when you had like an empty stomach, anybody done this before? And it's like greenish brown? No? It's gross. That's bile. Okay, and it has like that bitter taste. That's what bile tastes like. So that's coming from your your gallbladder. So anyway, its purpose is to hold bile. For various reasons, bile can crystallize. Bile salts can crystallize inside your gallbladder. So typically, it's only liquid in your gallbladder. Ideally, it's only liquid in your gallbladder so that you can use that bile to help break down fat. You need to put it into your small intestine to help you break down fat. But you can get crystals forming in your gallbladder, and once they form, they're very difficult to get rid of. So there's a teeny tiny little tube. You can see the tube right here. There's a teeny tiny little tube that feeds bile into your small intestine. And if you have crystals in there, they will clog that tube. Question?
That's different than kidney stones, right?
This is a very similar thing happening, but in the kidney, in the not the ureter, in the what's the name of the passage from the kidney to the bladder? Anyway, but adjacent to the kidney. Yeah, it's a very similar process in that you're getting crystals forming in there. In that case, it's uric acid or urea that's crystallizing, and in this case here, this is bile. That's hardening, but it is the same sort of thing. It's crystals forming.
Is it more common if your like family members have had it in the past?
Yes. Yeah. So this is a big part of this is genetic. So again, lucky me. My family is also prone. I've never had this before, but my family is really prone to getting gallstones. So if you have minor gallstones, usually you can just pass them, which means that you just kind of have to wait for them to make their way down that tiny tube and into your small intestine, and it hurts because they're not smooth. They're like jagged crystals that are like making their way through a soft tube, and so they kind of tear the tube up, and yeah, it hurts. It's really, really painful to pass these through the tube. If they're really big, like you've got yourself some giant calculi, some big crystals, then you might need surgery. So there may be no way to allow those to pass without completely blocking the tube. And you may have to have your gallbladder removed. So often when they don't just remove the crystals. If it's that bad, it usually means you're going to have recurrent gallbladder stones, like probably for the rest of your life. So they actually just remove your gallbladder. You can take it out. It means that you don't have as much capacity to digest fat any longer. So unless you roll back the amount of fat you consume, you end up passing a lot of undigested fat out the end, which is kind of a mess. So you're not as good at digesting fat if you have your gallbladder removed. So you're not
all that fat go?
out.
Oh.
Oh,
It makes a mess. Yeah, because it doesn't get digested and absorbed. So a lot of it just
Maybe
goes.
like poop it out?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of it just goes out. Yeah, it makes a mess. So you can still eat a little fat because you're still producing bile, and it can still go through the tube and go into the small intestine. But the reason that you have a gallbladder is when you can consume a lot of fat, it can squeeze out a huge amount of bile all at once to manage all the fat that's coming in. but you lose that capacity when you get rid of your gallbladder. So you can't just eat like, half a bag of potato chips. If you do that, something bad will happen. You won't have a nice day. So anyway, so those are gallstones, and as I mentioned, they can be a little bit painful. You can also use some of the interesting treatments for this. You can use ultrasound, which is sound waves, at a certain frequency to break up. Oh, cause for gallstones? Did I put a cause on there? Maybe I didn't. Some of the cause, Nadi, is genetic. So if some people are just genetically predisposed to getting gallstones. What are the other causes of gallstones? Being chronically dehydrated makes you more prone to getting them. A lot of it's genetic. You know what? Give me 2 seconds here. I'm actually going to add to this. I want to give you a good answer. If you have too high dietary cholesterol, so if your cholesterol is too high in your diet, that can lead to the formation of gallstones. Bile is made out of cholesterol. So if you have a lot of cholesterol in your blood, you actually produce more bile. And then there are some other genetic illnesses. You produce too much bilirubin, again, produced from bile, but that's more genetic. Or you potentially genetically have bad emptying of your gallbladder. So the tube that empties your gallbladder is just small, and that's usually genetic. So those are the causes. The symptoms is it hurts. You get a pain. So your gallbladder is located on your right side. Your liver is just under your ribs. So if you put my camera down here. If you feel like right under your ribs, right here, you can actually feel your liver. Yeah, go for it. You can feel it. It's the organ right here. Can you guys feel that? You can put your hands right on it. That's your liver. So right on top of that liver, your gallbladder is sitting right there. So if you get a really sharp pain here, usually after you eat, and often after you eat something that contains a lot of fat, that could potentially be gallstones. So it's a pain, basically. You feel pain there.
Well, wouldn't you feel it later because the stones will actually like...
You do, but it just starts then. Yeah, but absolutely you do feel it later. Yeah, it doesn't go away until you pass the stones. Yeah.
I think it would be kind of cool just to like open somebody up and just like see what's all in there.
Guys, we're going to have a look in the fetal pig. I will show you where the gallbladder is. It's the exact same configuration as a human.
I don't know, it's
When
kind
are
of
we
cool
gonna
though.
be doing the thing?
The fetal pig will do the last day of this unit, which is October. You caught me off guard here, Katab. It's the last day of this unit is October 30th. So it'll be after you guys come back to this course again.
So next week.
Not next week, not the week after, but the week after that.
Oh,
Because you guys are gonna have 2 weeks off, right? While you take your other course.
yeah. You do?
Yeah, you guys are gonna be in your other course, right? Because you have this course until next Wednesday, and then you're gonna be in your other course for 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Holy.
You were in this for 2 weeks.
Action?
Well,
Yeah, I'm gonna keep going here. Anyway, they can use ultrasound to break up the crystals a little bit and help you pass them, but you still got to pass them, so it hurts quite a bit. Anyway, it mentions on this slide that you can use endoscopy. Endoscopy is basically just using a camera on a long little tube, and so you can observe the process here. You can inspect the gallbladder, and you can like go up through the tube to take a look at it. But a lot of this stuff is done even without that now. They can do it with ultrasound. Okay, diarrhea. You're welcome. I didn't put any pictures in the slideshow of this one. So this is caused essentially by the fact that you're just not absorbing enough water in the large intestine. Okay, so there's lots of things that can potentially cause that, but the large intestine is there to absorb water from your food. If you do watch that video of the food going through, you'll notice that when it goes into the large intestine, it's wet. It's basically liquid traveling through your system, and the large intestine has to take that liquid and remove most of the moisture until it's mostly solid before it exits. So if that process is lacking and you're not reabsorbing most of the water in your large intestine, well, that's diarrhea, guys. So you probably know what it is. It's when you have watery feces. It seems like something so innocent, right? That because like people get that kind of stuff all the time, but it's actually super, super dangerous because it can dehydrate you to death if you have severe diarrhea. So certain types of bacterial illnesses, for example, will cause you to have diarrhea continuously, and you may have no source of fresh, clean water. I mean, we do here, but there are lots of places in the world where there's no fresh, clean water. And so you can't replenish the water without giving yourself more of whatever the bacteria is, and then you just end up dying from diarrhea. You dehydrate yourself to death, which is absolutely something that happens. I don't know if I have stats on here, but it's like millions of people die from diarrhea. So this is like, it's not like a totally innocuous issue. Sorry, did someone have their hand up in here? Okay, go
I
ahead.
thought diarrhea was green.
It depends on what you eat. It can be.
And I thought the runs were like the ones that were wet.
Often if it's greenish tint, I mean, that it can be caused by different things, but the greenish tints can also often be caused by bile. So if stuff is running through your system really fast, small and large intestine, sometimes you end up having a lot of bile in your stool that's visible as green. It's undigested bile that goes all the way through. But not always. So the colors comes in all colors.
Wait, I have a question.
All types, yes.
I saw this one video, and this guy was on Instagram. He said there was smoke coming off of his poop.
Smoke?
Yeah,
Not steam.
steam.
Steam. Okay, it was very
Not
very
smoke,
warm.
My bad. Steam.
That's
What does that mean?
You probably put it
You
in a
don't know?
cold
no
plate.
idea. Never heard that before.
He was probably in a cold place.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe it was just a really cold place. I don't know. Or he had a very high fever. It's also possible. I don't know. I've never heard of that before. That's a new one. Anyway, so what potentially causes diarrhea? Oh, lots of things. Anything that's going to make your digestive system operate too quickly. So you have undigested food that is moving through your system. For example, you are lactose intolerant, okay, and you consume milk. In that case, the milk is not going to get broken down in your digestive system, and that causes things to move too quickly. Everything rockets through your digestive system, and you end up with diarrhea in that case. So that would be one thing. There's neurological disorders that cause it. There's inflammatory bowel issues that cause it. There are genetic illnesses that cause people to get diarrhea regularly. There's bacterial illnesses. So like there's different sicknesses. Like obviously food poisoning causes you to get diarrhea. And that's a reflexive mechanism of the body, which is if you are ill in your intestines due to bacteria, your body's defense mechanism is get everything out of there as quickly as it can. It basically puts your digestive system on like super overdrive to try and get all of the bacteria out of there. That's the purpose of it. And so that's going to cause diarrhea for you. Treatments. We have medications that you can take that help control diarrhea. I can't think of any of them off the top of my head. In general, you are, what are you supposed to consume? Bananas, bread. You're supposed to avoid milk products. Usually when you get sick, stress. Stress can be a cause for sure. When you do have high stress or you are experiencing a whole host of digestive issues, often one of the first things to go is your ability to produce lactase, which is the enzyme that breaks down milk. So you become temporarily lactose intolerant. It's produced on the surface of your small intestine. So that means that if you're drinking milk while you already have diarrhea, you're like exacerbating the problem. So you generally avoid milk products in that case. Anyway, there's probably too many specific causes of diarrhea for me to list, and my phone is ringing. Give me 2 seconds, guys. I'm just gonna grab the phone. Hello, everyone. Oh, yeah, she was in portable 1, I believe. Oh, they are. Ah. No, sorry. I mean, she hasn't been in 1, 2, 3 since like the first day of school, I don't think, so. Sorry. All right, bye.
I thought every 2 weeks was supposed to cover 1 unit.
What's that? No, I have about 4-ish days per unit. Okay, what were we talking about here? Treatments for diarrhea. Hydration is the most important thing. So as I mentioned, like that's the main consequence. What's that? That's so, increasing your electrolyte intake would be good. Really, what you get from Gatorade in terms of electrolytes is a pinch of salt. That's what it is. So when they said it has electrolytes, it just means it has a pinch of salt in it. So a pinch of salt, a little bit of extra potassium, which can be solved through bananas, is a good thing for you to have. The symptoms of diarrhea. So the symptoms are where am I here? Watery feces.
Symptoms of that.
Increased bowel movements. Multiple bowel movements. I dare say you've probably experienced these symptoms before in your life. This is fairly common.
I don't think they're really symptoms. It just really happens.
It happens, it is. But the actual diarrhea itself is just the digestive system moving very quickly. It's moving at an increased pace, and then the symptom of it is that you're passing watery stool consistently. So, okay, I think I'm good to move on. I think I covered all 3 for that one. So, constipation. If you watch the Chubby Emu video that's after this, it's a really interesting Chubby Emu video of what happens when you're constipated for a week and you can't pass any feces for a week. I highly recommend that video if you're interested in medical case studies because it.
Wouldn't you have to get like so a cut from here around your belly button and then down?
So what happens in the case of this person from that video is that they have to have essentially they have to have their large intestine removed. So that happens when it gets extremely severe and you start getting blood. You stop being able to send blood to your large intestine because it's so swollen. That would obviously be if it was like extreme. That's like the most extreme that you could get, right? That person gets a perforated colon where stuff starts coming out of the colon, like out the side. So that'd be the worst case scenario. Long before things get that bad, people usually seek medical treatment. So people don't usually wait for a week or, an extremely extended period of being constipated. And you can usually loosen the stool up using drugs in order to get things moving. Yeah, fiber works sometimes. If it's very severe, though, we may be beyond the fiber threshold in terms of getting things moving. But yes, certainly that fiber is a big part. So anyway, what is constipation? Constipation is the opposite of diarrhea. It's when your digestive system is slowed down for whatever reason. And so there are a couple of things that cause your digestive system to slow down. One of them is no fiber in your diet. So if you don't consume fiber, fiber is the thing in your diet that holds water and allows things to continuously pass through your digestive system. So if you don't have any material that holds on to water, the stool, when it passes through the large intestine, gets very hard. It gets all of the water absorbed out of it, and it can become so hard that it actually can't be pushed through the system any longer. It gets stuck. So you need to consume fiber. It's really important to consume fiber. So that's probably the most common cause of constipation for people is just not getting enough fiber. But there are also, there are genetic issues that cause constipation. There are drugs, a lot of drugs that cause constipation. A lot of pain medications cause it. Gravol is a good example of a medication which they talk about in the video. Of something that basically tells your digestive system to relax. It's like a digestive system relaxing medication. And if you relax it and you stop that muscle movement that's pushing food through the system, it just stops. So if the food stops there and gets totally dried out, it ends up forming a blockage and then it gets really, really hard for you to pass. Okay, so too much water gets reabsorbed. How do you treat it? As you mentioned, you can eat fiber. So eating fiber is good as a treatment. It was supposed to be our second class. Oh, sorry, Carmel, I'm not sure what you mean by that. I'm going to keep going in the meantime, Carmel, but I will answer your question when it pops up, okay? I'm just not 100% sure what you mean by that. Anyway, so in the first stages, you can add fiber. So that increases the amount of water that you keep in your large intestine. It moistens things up, and it allows you to pass things. The other thing you could do potentially is you could use drugs. So there are certain drugs that actually cause the large intestine to work in reverse. So instead of removing water from the large intestine, it actually pumps water into the large intestine. And those drugs obviously are going to rehydrate what's in there and potentially get the entire process going again. If it's extremely severe, as in the case of that video, then you're probably getting into surgical territory. So if you have a real solid impaction, hard as a rock, and you can't get it out of there, it may require surgery for removal, but that's obviously extreme. So in most cases, that's not going to happen for people. Definitely if you're not passing a stool in many days and you're in pain, seek medical help. Like that's kind of an emergency. Like you don't want to leave that. Oh, sorry, Carmela. Yes, you actually have this class still until, what's the last day? Wednesday, October 14th. The symptom of constipation, Nadia, is that you just don't pass any stool. You have no bowel movements for a prolonged period of time. There's probably an actual definition in terms of days, but it would be specific to you because some people only go every second day or something like that. So, but it's irregular bowel movements. You're not moving your bowels as often as you need to. Okay, did I cover all three there? Causes, symptoms, treatment? Okay. Hemorrhoids. Affects about 75% of people over their lifetime. So, yeah, they're extremely, extremely common. They seem to be a lot more common in the West than they are in the East. For example, in India, hemorrhoids are actually quite rare. But here they're very common. I don't know 100% what the difference is. So a lot of people think that the difference may be our use of toilets here. Because the way that we use toilets, it kind of lends itself to a lot of pushing. And pushing creates a ton of pressure in the rectum. You're like pushing really hard on your rectum with your abdominal muscles. And that increased pressure actually causes these blood vessels to get distended around your anus, which is what is causing the hemorrhoids themselves. They are distended blood vessels.
How do they go to the bathroom?
They crouch.
What?
They crouch. They crouch down over a hole. And when you're crouching down, it's much basically the positioning of your bowels is much straighter.
So then it's,
And it requires a lot less pushing in order to evacuate your bowels. And so a lot of people think that could be the potential reason. They're putting less strain essentially on their bowels, and so they tend to get hemorrhoids a lot less, which is interesting. So anyway, there's two places you can get the hemorrhoids. There are these blood vessels that are around the anus, okay? So there's ones that are right on the sphincter themselves, and then there are other blood vessels that are right below the sphincter. And because of that additional pressure that you're placing on the sphincter through pushing, over time, you can cause those blood vessels to like get distended and kind of like droop. So if you have internal hemorrhoids, those are essentially blood vessels from above the sphincter that are protruding out through the sphincter. They're little blood vessels that are sticking out. If you've ever seen, have you guys ever seen, what are they called? In the leg, they are varicose veins. Have you guys seen varicose veins before? You've probably seen these, like on other people. I doubt anyone here probably has varicose veins, but
when they're purple?
Yes, exactly. But you can get really bad varicose veins, especially in the elderly. Like this is very common. Have you guys seen these before?
Yeah, on older people.
Right. So these are distended blood vessels. They're blood vessels that are kind of experiencing a little bit of black backflow and poking through the skin. That's a hemorrhoid. Okay. The hemorrhoid is exactly the same thing, except it's the blood vessels around the anus. So it is exactly the same process as this, but just happening around the anus at the same time. So it is the same thing. It's also much more common in pregnant women because a lot of the hormones that you produce during pregnancy or during menopause can potentially exacerbate this problem, just like they can with varicose veins. So varicose veins are worse for pregnant and postmenopausal women as well. Okay, so what are the symptoms of this? They can be itchy. So if you have these blood vessels protruding out of your anus, it can hurt and it can be itchy. Also, people tend to rupture them when they're wiping. And so they can bleed. So if you get blood, red blood on your toilet paper, that's probably the best indication that you have hemorrhoids. If you ever do see blood, you should probably go talk to a doctor about that, obviously. But hemorrhoids is the most common cause of that. So they can rupture usually, and they, like I said, 75% of people get them at some point in their life, so it's very, very common.
How old do you usually get that?
Usually the first onset of these is in people's late 30s and early 40s.
It says it right there, ages 45 to 65.
45 to 65 is when it's extremely common. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Off to the side there, it says between the ages of 45 to 65. Yeah.
You can get them.
And in pregnant.
Late
Pregnant and
30s,
postmenopausal women. What's
late
that?
30s.
You can get them. Absolutely. People get them in their teens. So people that have extremely low fiber in their diet or a genetic predisposition to getting hemorrhoids, that also exists. You can potentially get them very young. So you can get them in your 20s. If you have no fiber in your diet and you have to really strain to go to the bathroom all the time, you are going to cause damage to your blood vessels. Like there's just no way around it. And so then you do end up potentially getting hemorrhoids at that point. That'd be really unfortunate if you got in your 20s. But it can happen though.
And what happens? Like,
These protruding blood vessels are sticking out and they're itchy and uncomfortable.
How do you get rid of it?
Treatment, that's the next thing. So the first treatment for hemorrhoids is start eating fiber so that you don't have to push so hard. Oftentimes when people start eating more fiber, this actually just resolves itself. So the distension can actually go away, the swelling can go away, and people just have them go away. Exercise improves it as well, because it also causes your bowel movements to be less pushy if you're exercising regularly. Drinking more fluid, again, that also allows things to pass through your digestive system without pushing. So drinking more water. I don't know what cleanliness means. I don't remember adding that to this. I'm sure I had something in mind when I put that on there. Cleanliness. I'm not sure what that means. I don't think it has anything to do with wiping cleanliness, but there are some people also get hemorrhoids related to stress. So it can be a precipitating factor. So eliminating stress can also help. You can have them surgically removed. So the external hemorrhoids, going back to the previous diagram, the ones that are on the outside right here, you can have them tied off with a little elastic band. And
That holds it.
what happens is the blood supply gets cut off, they turn black, and they just fall off.
And you poop them out?
Well, they're outside. They're external hemorrhoids, so they just fall off your butt.
External hemorrhoid?
Yeah, they're just outside of your anus, like just outside on the outside. Yeah. For the internal ones, I don't think you can band these and surgically remove them. You may be able to have them burned off or surgically removed, like in an actual surgical procedure. Yeah,
Turned off.
yeah.
It's
But
like a blood pressure
anytime
device.
you're doing cutting around the anus, it's a very that's a dicey surgical procedure. It's a delicate muscle with lots of nerve in it, and you don't want to damage it because obviously, if you can't control your anus anymore, you're going to get into some trouble in your life because you can't prevent yourself from going to the bathroom. So, surgical option is really, really last resort. That's if you've got them really bad. I think in general, though, they try and avoid surgical option for that. Okay, that's hemorrhoids. How many left do I have left here? I have a couple.
I'm definitely not watching any of these videos.
You don't want to see any of that? I get it. So inflammatory bowel illnesses are illnesses where the lining of the bowel, the large intestine, becomes inflamed for reasons. Okay, they can be genetic, potentially. So for some reason, you're seeing this inflammatory response on the inside of your bowels. Crohn's is the most common. Ulcerative colitis is another kind. Oh, sorry, yeah, there's pictures on there. I forgot to put my trigger warning on this one. Inflammatory bowel. Oh, I'm trying to zoom in on these. You can actually see some of the ulcers that are forming on the inside of the bowel right here in this ulcerative colitis. The symptoms for what, Nadia? Sorry? Do you mean the symptoms for which one? Hemorrhoids? Oh, constipation. Or no, am I right here? Sorry, Nadia. Can you? I'm gonna see if I can get the delay down on this presentation so there isn't so much delay between me talking and the comments. For inflammatory bowel. Hold on, I'll get to that in a second here. But the symptoms is mostly pain. It's pain and loose stool, which is it's going to potentially cause diarrhea and pain. You can also get potential blockage. I don't know if you can see like the ulcers that are forming on the inside there, but they can potentially actually block the bowel, so they can cause bowel blockage if they get bad enough. You get pain, cramping. You can get bleeding from these ulcers. So the main way to diagnose this is if you have pain, you just have to do a colonoscopy. So a colonoscopy is just a procedure where they take a camera and they go up and have a look. So they go up through the anus with a camera, they'll peek around, and they look for these inflammatory things on the inside of the intestine. So these inflammatory things are, like I said, there's genetic causes to these. Some of them are allergy related. But there's usually some type of underlying genetic cause for most of these. This is different from IBS. If you've ever heard of irritable bowel syndrome. There you go. This is different from irritable bowel syndrome. So irritable bowel syndrome is not caused by anything visible inside of the large intestine. So if you know people that have irritable bowel, their inside of their intestine looks totally normal. There's no obvious inflammatory mechanism at play, but they may also have diarrhea or other issues with cramping and bloating and whatever. But it's related to other causes that are not physical causes in the large intestine. So that's IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. So this is a little bit different. Inflammatory bowel diseases are ones where there is a physical cause. So there's some type of ulceration or inflammatory mechanism that's happening inside the bowel and then causing, well, you can see what it looks like there. So causing types of inflammatory response on the inside of the bowel. How far does the camera go? It goes all the way up. If you're getting a full colonoscopy, it goes all the way up to the ileocecal valve. So if I go back in the diagram here, this is the beginning of the large intestine and the end of the small intestine. There's a little valve there called the ileocecal valve, and the camera goes all the way up to the valve. So if you were like looking at this person from the front, they would go in through the anus. It would go up, over, down, and then across a little bit to the valve. It really goes in there. If you've ever had it done before, it's not the most fun procedure in the world. They do give you a little bit of anesthetic, so you don't feel it too much, but it's
You're awake?
They don't put you under?
not always. You
That's a L.
sometimes people fall asleep from the mild anesthetic, but they're really not giving you like a full anesthetic, so you know you don't really fall asleep. It is it's a little bit on the uncomfortable side. They also pump air in to open up the bowel so they can see things a little bit better.
If you pump air into your body, like this.
No, not into the bowel. I mean, it's gentle, right? It's not like 10 psi or anything, but it's a little bit of air to kind of inflate things, and then that air does have to come out afterwards. So it's probably it's a little bit uncomfortable, but it shouldn't be dangerous unless you have unless you have a potential perforation of your bowel. I hope that answered your question, Brody. Anyway, how do you treat inflammatory bowel diseases? Do I have that on another slide? No, I don't. There's my. Oh, I actually have a picture of endoscopy right here. So there's the route that they do. You can also get a sigmoidoscopy. A sigmoidoscopy is just like the first little section of your large intestine. So depending on what they're trying to do when they look inside, they might just image the first section. But oftentimes they do the whole thing. So that's it's quite a reach for the camera. What was I just talking about? Treatments. Oh, so these are tough. A lot of these, like I said, are genetic illnesses. There are some medications that can be used to treat inflammatory bowel diseases. Often there are dietary restrictions that are involved. Stopping eating certain foods that help, because there can be dietary triggers for inflammatory bowel. Sometimes there are stress triggers, so there's treatment for stress. But they are quite difficult to treat, unfortunately. If things get really bad, like you can see on the previous diagram there's some pictures of pretty bad inflammation in the bowel. Sometimes surgery is required. So you do have to remove those sometimes. If there's cysts or blockage of the bowel, you may have to have parts of your bowel removed. So that's unfortunate. You might have to have an ileostomy or a colostomy bag, where they create an alternative exit from your large intestine. So and that you may have to wear a bag on the outside to collect feces. So
I've seen that before.
right, and that does happen, and it's that's sort of like a last resort treatment. But I mean, it is necessary sometimes. So okay, let's see, what have I got here? Oh, I have some more inflammatory bowel pictures. So here are some cysts here. You can see how those cysts could potentially obstruct the bowel. So, like I said, sometimes you have to have surgery to have those cysts removed. Oh, I didn't realize I had a whole treatment side here. Right, so you can do stuff to help suppress the immune system and reduce your inflammation. That's usually drug treatment, although it can be dietary. You can potentially give somebody a fecal transplant. So that's an interesting idea. So the reason that a fecal transplant is literally when you take poop, fecal matter from a healthy person and put it into a person with inflammatory bowel illness. And that's an interesting idea. So the reasoning behind that is that the bacteria that grow in your gut are helping maintain the health of your gut. So if you take somebody's healthy gut bacteria and you put them into an unhealthy person, oftentimes that can reverse a lot of the inflammation caused by inflammatory bowel. And so it is absolutely an effective treatment for certain types of inflammatory bowel illness. It sounds gross, but it does work. I was talking to my wife about this the other day. So my wife is a family doctor. And I asked her about fecal transplant, like, do we do that? Is that like a thing that people actually get? Yes, but surprisingly, or maybe unsurprisingly, it's actually really hard to find sources of fecal matter for this. We don't have a lot of like ways of getting healthy people's gut bacteria in a safe manner in order to do a fecal transplant. So arranging a fecal transplant in Canada, even though it is an effective treatment for some types of inflammatory bowel, it's actually really hard to find donors for poop donors is what it is.
Well,
So that's, what's that?
why don't they ask, like, there's like, they make blood donation advertisements, but like.
Because we don't have a really good coordinated system for managing that, like we do with blood. It's one of those things where nobody wants to deal with it. Even in the medical field, people are like, I don't want to deal with that. And so there just is no one doing it because no one wants to deal with it. But it is an effective treatment. So I wonder if that'll change in the future. There'd be something to follow up with my wife about. But apparently it is very difficult to find a donor. I just thought that was interesting. You could tell someone that it's a good thing for them to do, and then you just can't find anyone to donate or anyone that will do the procedure for you. Anyway, oh yeah, and I mentioned the elostomy or the colostomy bag. There's an example of one right there. And so then sometimes people have an alternate exit that is surgical from their large intestine. So you have a bag. Sometimes these are temporary. So they will close up part of the large intestine and give it an opportunity to heal. Or sometimes they're permanent. So it depends on the reason for the colostomy bag. Sometimes they're permanent. So it depends. Okay, what am I about to show you here? Polyps. Is this even on the sheet? What's the next one on the sheet?
I don't know where the sheet is. I don't have it up.
Oh, you're not following along with the note.
Is there stuff that you're supposed to be writing?
Yeah, all the stuff.
I thought I couldn't see it, so like.
It's in it's in the note from the. It's okay. It's in the note from the first part here. What's the next one? IBD polyps. So I can show you what they look like. There's an example of a polyp right there. There are two sort of versions of polyps. Thanks, Nadia. There are flat ones that sort of adhere to the wall of the large intestine. Those are called sessile polyps. And then there are peduncular ones, which are the ones that sort of protrude out into the large intestine. And they can be potentially extremely large. So they can be large enough to completely block your large intestine. Obviously, that would be severe. These grow for all different types of reasons. They can grow in totally healthy people. Forming some polyps may just be a natural part of the aging process. Although some people are genetically more predisposed to these than others. And polyps, if left untreated, if you don't remove them, can become colon cancer. So the one thing about polyps is that if you do have them, you need to remove them. Because if they're just hanging out, poking into your large intestine, eventually they can become cancerous. So over time, they tend to become more and more mutated over time, the cells in them, and eventually they can become cancerous. So you diagnose this with a sigmoidoscopy or a colonoscopy. And basically what they do is they take a little loop of wire. I should post a video of this. In fact, I will post a video of this if you want to see what this looks like. But they take a little loop of wire on a string. They loop it around the polyp. This is while they're doing your colonoscopy. And then they electrify the string. It's like a little metal string. And then they just tug it and cut off the polyp, basically. And because it's electrified, it cauterizes the wound as you cut it off, and so it doesn't bleed into your large intestine, or it doesn't bleed very much. And so they can just kind of just trim these off the inside of your large intestine. It's a pretty simple procedure. But you got to check them. So you want to check to make sure that the polyps that you're removing have not already become cancerous. So they always send them away for pathology report afterwards to check whether or not the polyps are cancer. Most of them are not. But if they are cancerous, then you also have to have follow-up treatment for colon cancer because you do have colon cancer at that point. But usually if you catch them early enough, you don't need to do that. That's one of the reasons why adults are recommended over the age of 50 to get a colonoscopy. So I don't know how old your parents are. Would they be in their 50s? No. Yes? So maybe your parents are in their 50s. Certainly mine are, much older than that. If they are over 50 and they haven't had a colonoscopy, they should get one. You should just have one. It's not a fun procedure, obviously, but you absolutely could catch some polyps that are precancerous and prevent yourself from getting colon cancer. It's a very low risk procedure, and it could save you, obviously, a life-threatening condition of colon cancer. It's free for anybody over the age of, I think, 50. It might be 55. I have to double check. But it is a free screening procedure that really your family physician should be recommending to you if you're over that age, just to check. So you should be having those, have a look at those. But if you do catch them and remove them before they can become cancerous, wow, you dodged a bullet, guys. So you just like dodged your colon cancer, which is pretty amazing. It says that they happen to about 15 to 20% of the adult population. I have a feeling that it's actually a little bit higher than that number, but we only catch it in 15 to 20%. Question.
What's that thing when they like doctor like stick their hand up your bum and then like do something?
You could use that for a different reason, but I have a feeling you mean for a prostate exam.
That one.
They're checking for prostate cancer in that case, for a
Okay,
swollen
that's
prostate. Yeah. That you can also use that to check for hemorrhoids, but I don't think that's what you mean.
Would that hurt more than a camera?
I don't know if it hurts more.
It's just really uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. The camera, keep in mind when they do the colonoscopy, they do give you sedation. So you're not asleep, but they are giving you drugs so that you don't really care about it very much while it's happening. So when you're having a prostate exam, there's no sedation for the prostate exam. That's just a prostate exam. So it is, yeah, they're a little bit on the uncomfortable side, but I mean, again, medically necessary. Okay, anyway, like I said, most polyps are benign. They're not cancerous, but you could potentially catch a cancerous one. I have here that regular screening begins at 50. I wrote this a while ago. I think they might have changed the age to 55. I'm not 100% sure, but you could look this up. You could just Google that if you're curious. For symptoms for this one, there are none. So if you have a polyp in your large intestine, there's really no way for you to know that unless it's extremely, extremely large and it starts bleeding, in which case you would get red stool. But it's pretty rare for a polyp to get that big. Well, I shouldn't say that. Maybe obviously if you have colon cancer brewing in there, it is possible for them to get that big. But ideally, it would be good to find the polyp before it becomes that big. So you would hopefully be catching it before that time. But if not, then it would be through blood in your stool. They usually don't cause pain. So, and then the cause. There is really no cause. It's genetic. So some people are more prone to polyps than others. It's possible that there are some dietary things that are associated with polyps, but we actually don't really know that much about the cause of polyps. So I don't really have a lot of information for you on that one. Okay, I think this is the last one. Are we in the last one, guys?
For what, this thing? No, we're close.
No, we're close.
No, you still have about like.
Oh, I'm gonna skip over this one. Oh yeah, I mentioned colon cancer. I'm just gonna jump over this real quick. This is what happens when you don't treat your polyps. I'm gonna kind of skip through this.
Oh, you have 6 more slides.
I'm gonna skip past all this stuff. So here's a really, really bad polyp that has developed into colon cancer, and you can see that it's blocking the entire colon at that point. Then you are gonna get symptoms in that case if you have a really, really bad. What's that, sorry?
That's big.
It's big, yeah, and get real big. And it also has a tendency to metastasize, to go to other locations in the body once you start having like really significant colon cancer. So it's best to catch this early. Okay, appendicitis, next. This is when you get an inflammation of your appendix, which is that little offshoot right at the very beginning of your large intestine. It's caused by bacterial infection. Why do you get a bacterial infection there? I'm not really 100% sure. Sometimes it gets blocked due to food particles and stuff getting blocked, getting pushed into the entrance of your appendix, but it's not always that. So we don't really 100% know what causes all cases of appendicitis, but essentially you're getting an inflammation in your appendix caused by a bacterial infection. It swells up, it's full of bacteria, and if you don't treat it in time, it can rupture and cause blood poisoning, sepsis.
Can't your appendix burst?
That's what I mean. Yeah, so it can rupture, it can break.
Okay.
So in general, if you have a swelling of your appendix, that is pain, if you find the peak of your hip, let's see if I can show you this, where this is on me. If you find the peak of your hip, and then the peak of your rib, right here, right in between, I don't know if I'm showing this on camera very well, right in here. So here I've got where my ribs come to a little peak right here, and then the peak of my hip on this side. Halfway in between that point, right there, is where your appendix is located, okay, on your right. So if you're feeling pain in that area of your body right there, that's appendix pain, okay? That's go to the hospital, just so you know. So if you're starting to feel serious pain in there, you're going to want to seek some medical attention because you could potentially have some swollen appendix. It could be potentially ready to burst. And the treatment really is just surgical removal. That's pretty much the only thing that we have for it. So it's caused by a bacterial infection. The symptoms are pain in your abdomen, and the treatment is to have it surgically removed. Yes?
Sorry, could you remove your appendix just cause or no?
There are cases where they pre-remove it. If you go, for example, to work in Antarctica, they don't have facilities there to remove your appendix in an emergency. So they'll actually remove it before you go there. Just on the off chance that you get appendicitis.
Do you really need your appendix or no?
So what the appendix is for is a really good question. It doesn't have any obvious purpose, but what we think was the purpose, or may still be the purpose for it, is after you get diarrhea, you basically wash all of the bacteria out of your large intestine. That's a purpose of diarrhea, really. That's why your body's doing it. And you can repopulate your large intestine with gut bacteria from your appendix. It holds on to a sample of your gut bacteria. And you need that gut bacteria for proper digestion and maintaining the conditions inside your large intestine. So that's probably its purpose. So you do lose that if you have your appendix removed. But it's not essential for life. You might make you more prone to inflammatory bowel, but... Okay, and then you can have an appendectomy, which is where you just, oh, there it is right there. So there's the appendix, and they're just going to snip that little guy off right there. It's, in case you're wondering which part, it's like this little loop-de-doo right here. So that's the appendix sticking off of the large intestine. And they do it laparoscopically, usually with a tiny little incision. They don't do open surgery for appendix removal anymore that I'm aware of. There's a long healing time associated with that. Okay, last one. The one you didn't suspect, C. difficile infection. So C. difficile is a bacterial infection of your large intestine. And oddly enough, this one is usually caused by taking antibiotics. That's the most common cause of getting a C. difficile infection. So what ends up happening when you take antibiotics is you kill all of the bacteria that live in your large intestine. That's one of the side effects of taking antibiotics. And when you do that, what you do is you leave a blank slate, an empty growing area for bacteria to repopulate. And sometimes the bacteria that repopulate are not the bacteria that you want to repopulate. It's sort of like what happened if you removed all the people from the city. It'd be like, well, who moves into the city and like repopulates it? Are they the people you want in the city? Or maybe there's people that are like up to no good or whatever in your city. These are people that are up to no good taking over the city. Okay, that's what it is. It's a whole city for them to repopulate, but they're up to no good. So C. difficile causes severe diarrhea. And the problem with it is that it's very difficult to treat because if you treat it with antibiotics, that's how you cause C. difficile. So often treating it with antibiotics causes you to get C. difficile again. It just causes you to re-get it.
What would you do then?
Basically, you just need to weather the storm on this one. So
you just like wait it out.
yeah, unless it's severe. So if it's so severe that it's causing, you get sepsis or something like that, blood poisoning, like a really severe bacterial infection, at some point they may have to treat it with antibiotics and hope for the best. But ideally here, you got to weather the storm on this one. You're going to have severe diarrhea for a while.
How long's like a while? Like
Several days.
oh, I thought you're for a while. I thought you meant like a month.
If you start to getting into territory of weeks and things like that, then they're going to propose alternate treatment methods. Then you got to try something else because that's, again, people die from diarrhea. Like it can be very serious if you have it for an extended period. So they're going to have to do some other method of treatment.
Up your stomach. And it's like you're leaving it essentially with nothing.
You're having difficulty absorbing nutrients during that entire time. You're dehydrating yourself severely. Yeah, there's a lot of complications from it. So basically, at this point, you just need to weather the storm until the rest of your gut bacteria can repopulate. You can potentially use fecal transplant for treatment of C. difficile as well, but again, it doesn't work very well because we don't have a lot of donors, and so we don't have a great system of treatment for C. difficile. But this is the one of the bacterial infections of the gut that's actually caused by antibiotics. And so antibiotics are a terrible treatment for it because it's caused by antibiotics. So often people when they get this, they want to have antibiotic treatment, but it's counterproductive. No, the symptom would be diarrhea. So it's severe diarrhea that you get with C. difficile. And the cause here is a bacterial infection. The bacterial infection is C. difficile. And the treatment is wait it out. Wait it out. I mean, and ideally, you try and protect yourself from getting more C. difficile. So you got to sanitize your hands and ensure you're doing proper hand washing and stuff like that. So that's how you're protecting yourself.
And hand sanitizer is not effective.
It is effective for killing C. difficile on your hands.
These hand sanitizers are not effective at killing the. And then scroll down.
Oh. I think what that actually says is not effective at killing it once you have a C. difficile infection. Once you have it, it's not effective potentially because you already have it in your gut at that point. That's right. But we try and use those methods to prevent people from getting C. difficile. People that, especially vulnerable people that are being treated in the hospital with antibiotics, like the elderly, they're very prone to getting a C. difficile infection after treatment with antibiotics. So then you have to be careful when you manage them to try and keep them in a fairly low bacteria environment, sanitize hands, etc. Okay, I've done lots of talking here. That's all that I'm going to say about this. How are we doing for time? We're actually almost out of time.
Yeah.
I've got one last thing for you here on the website. Hopefully that was illuminating for you, and hopefully you don't have to deal with too many of these things, but inevitably some of them you are going to have to. At the bottom, there's this little chubby emu video. It's called "A Lawyer Couldn't Sleep for 9 Days." This is what happened to their kidneys, I think. Consider watching it. It's a cool video, and it talks about what happens if you are severely constipated for a week, and it's not good. Anyway, if you're curious, it's a medical case study, or a real life case. Okay, I'm gonna sign off for now, guys. Let me know by email, or you can stop by the virtual classroom if you're having any problems with the questions for today, which is page 342, 1, 3, 5, and 10. And other than that, just keep getting those assignments into me. Oh, and also one last thing to mention, there is a new vocabulary list for this unit. It's the Anatomy of Mammals vocabulary list. There's one for every unit. So you just want to make sure that you're adding your words to the vocabulary list as we go here. That way you won't have to do it all in the end. Theo, you actually still have me for 2 more classes, so so don't disappear yet. You've got me until October 14th. So I will see you until October 14th. Don't disappear. And progress reports will be coming to you October 13th at the latest. Okay, so I'll be working on catching up all your marking on the weekend, and you will get a full progress report. All right, have a good one, guys. Enjoy your weekend.
Are you done any of them?